there is a person you might know. From the outside, their life looks mostly held together. They show up to work. They answer messages. They smile at the right moments and say the right things when someone asks how they are doing. They have a routine. They maintain it. And if you looked at them from across a room, you might think, that person is fine. That person has it together. That person is managing. But you would be wrong. Because on the inside, that same person lies awake at 2 in the morning, staring at a ceiling that offers no answers. On the inside, they have had the same conversation with themselves. So many times it has worn grooves into their thinking. The conversation that starts with, maybe things will shift soon, and ends with, but what if they never do? On the inside, they carry something they cannot quite name. A weight that is not quite grief and not quite fear, but lives somewhere between the two. Pressing quietly against their chest every single morning before they even get out of bed. They have prayed, they have tried, they have waited, and still, from the inside, it feels like the world is moving forward, and they are standing in place, wondering what is wrong with them, wondering why it feels so hard to be them, wondering if anyone can see what they are actually carrying beneath the surface of all that composed, functional, presentable living. That person is you. And I need you to hear me say that, not as an accusation, but as a recognition. Because you came to this message today, and you did not come here by accident. Something pulled you here. Something in you that is older and wiser than your current exhaustion knew that this was exactly the place you needed to be, at this exact moment, hearing exactly these words. You are a chosen one. I do not say that as flattery. I do not say it to make you feel temporarily better before you go back to the same heaviness tomorrow. I say it because there are specific signs that mark a life like yours. Signs that most people around you cannot see because most people around you are not carrying what you are carrying. And today, I want to name those signs for you, one by one, so that something in you can finally exhale and say, yes, that is me. I have not been imagining this. The first sign is that you feel things at a depth that genuinely exhausts you. Not because you are weak, but because you are wired differently. You feel the pain of people you barely know. You feel the weight of situations that have not even happened yet. You walk into a room and you can sense the emotional temperature before anyone has said a word. Other people move through their days with a kind of lightness that seems almost foreign to you. And you have wondered, more than once, whether feeling this much is a gift or a burden. The answer, chosen one, is that it is both, and it is also a sign. The second sign is that you have been through something, or several somethings, that should have broken you, and somehow it did not. You are still here. You are still standing. Maybe barely, maybe holding on with both hands in a prayer, but you are here. And there is a part of you that cannot fully explain how. Other people look at what you have been through and say, I do not know how you survived that, and you do not always know how either. But you did. That survival is not random. That is the fingerprint of something larger than circumstance working in your life. The third sign is that you have a recurring sense that you were made for something specific, something you have not yet fully stepped into. It is not arrogance. It is more like a low hum beneath everything else you do, a knowing that sits quietly in the background, reminding you that the version of your life you are living right now is not the complete picture. You were made for more than this. Not more in the sense of wealth or status, but more in the sense of impact, of depth, of purpose that ripples outward in ways you cannot yet see. The fourth sign is that you have experienced moments of inexplicable protection. Times when something should have gone wrong and did not. Times when a door closed that, looking back, you are deeply grateful was closed. Times when you were held back from something that, had you gotten it, would have harmed you. You may not have recognized those moments as protection when they happened. You may have called them disappointment or rejection. But there is a pattern there, beloved, and the pattern is not random. Someone has been watching over your steps in ways you have not yet had the full language to describe. The fifth sign is that you are here, right now, listening to this, because messages like this one do not find people by accident. The people who find their way to words like these are the ones who are on the edge of something, standing at a threshold they can feel but cannot yet see clearly, carrying a hunger for something true and deep and real that the noise of ordinary life has not been able to fully satisfy. That is you. That has always been you. I want you to know something that I need you to receive, not just in your mind, but in the part of you that has been waiting the longest. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not the exception to the grace that everyone else seems to be walking in. You are positioned. You are being held. And the battle that feels like it is against you is actually being fought on your behalf by forces you have not yet been able to see. Heaven has not been absent from your story. Heaven has been in every chapter of it, including the chapters that nearly destroyed you, including the chapters you would never have chosen, including the chapters you are still living right now that make no sense yet from where you are standing. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. There is something that happens in a season like the one you are in, and almost no one talks about it honestly. People will tell you to stay positive. People will tell you to trust the process. People will hand you a verse or a quote or a story about someone who waited and then received. And they mean well, they genuinely do. But what they are not doing is sitting down beside you in the middle of the actual feeling and saying, I see what this is costing you. I see what it actually feels like from the inside. Not the inspirational version of it, the real version. The version that does not make it into the highlight reel. The version that lives in the quiet moments when no one is watching and you are just you, alone with everything you are carrying. That is what I want to do right now. Not rush you toward the sunrise, not skip over the dark. I want to sit with you in it for a moment, because you deserve to have someone name what you are actually feeling before anyone tells you what to do about it. So, let me name it. The first thing I want to name is the wave. You know the one. It comes without warning, usually when things are quiet, when you are driving alone, or standing in the shower, or lying in bed in that strange space between waking and sleep. It is a wave of sadness. It is not quite about today. It is about time. It is about the years that have passed, and the version of your life you thought you would be living by now, and the distance between where you are and where you believed you would be at this point. It is not depression, not exactly. It is more like grief with no clear object. You are mourning a timeline that never arrived. And because the thing you are mourning never technically existed, you feel almost embarrassed to grieve it. But the grief is real. The loss is real, and you are allowed to feel it. The second thing I want to name is the strangeness. Lately, familiar places have started to feel different. People you have known for years suddenly feel like they are speaking a language you are slowly losing fluency in. Places that used to feel like home feel slightly off, like a song played in the wrong key, recognizable but not quite right. You find yourself pulling back from gatherings you used to enjoy, not because you dislike the people, but because something in you is shifting. And the version of you that fits comfortably in those old spaces is quietly being replaced by someone you have not yet fully met. This is disorienting. It is supposed to be. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are outgrowing a container that was never meant to be permanent. The third thing I want to name is the dream, or the recurring image. Many people in the season you are in describe a specific kind of dream, a door. Sometimes it is a door they cannot open. Sometimes it is a door they are standing in front of, hand on the handle, unable to make themselves turn it. Sometimes it is a door at the end of a long hallway, and no matter how long they walk toward it, the distance never seems to close. If you have had that dream, or something like it, I need you to hear this clearly. That door is not locked against you. That door is not a symbol of something being withheld. That door is a symbol of a threshold you are approaching. And the reason you have not walked through it yet is not because you are unworthy. It is because you are not quite finished being prepared for what is on the other side. The fourth thing I want to name is the repetition. You keep encountering the same message. Not in the same form, but the same message. A word from a stranger. A line in a book you picked up by chance. A conversation that takes an unexpected turn and lands on something that makes your chest tighten because it is exactly what you have been thinking about in private. A song on the radio at the exact moment you needed to hear it. A message like this one. These are not coincidences. When the same message keeps finding you through different voices and different channels, that is not random noise. That is confirmation. Something is trying to reach you, and it is using every available frequency to do it. Now I want to speak to the specific pain, because there are textures of what you are carrying that I do not want to gloss over. There is the insomnia, the kind where your body is exhausted but your mind refuses to stop running. You lie there and the thoughts come, the what-ifs and the why-nots, and the mental replays of conversations and decisions, and moments you cannot change. Sleep feels like something that happens to other people. You have tried the routines, you have tried the silence, and still, some nights, the dark just sits with you without offering any rest. I see that, and I want you to know it is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that your inner world is processing something enormous, something so large that your sleeping hours alone are not enough to contain it. There is the loneliness, not always the literal kind, though sometimes that too. But more often it is the loneliness of being in a room full of people and feeling fundamentally unseen. The loneliness of having a rich, complex inner life that you cannot fully share because the people closest to you do not quite have the language for what you are experiencing. The loneliness of going through something significant and not having anyone in your immediate world who has been there, who genuinely understands, who can look you in the eye and say, I know exactly what that feels like. That particular loneliness is one of the defining marks of a chosen life. Not because chosen people are meant to suffer alone, but because the path they walk is often one that others have not yet taken. There is the feeling of being wronged, of having done things right, of having been faithful and patient and kind, and still watching opportunities bypass you, still watching people with less integrity and less depth land in rooms you were meant to be in. That sting is real. I will not tell you to just forgive and move on, as though what happened to you was nothing. Something was taken from you. Something was denied, and the anger and the hurt that comes from that is not a spiritual failure. It is a human response to genuine injustice. And there is the feeling of being misunderstood, of having your intentions read wrong, of having your silence mistaken for pride, and your sensitivity mistaken for weakness, and your depth mistaken for difficulty, of presenting yourself as honestly as you know how, and still having people arrive at conclusions about you that bear no resemblance to who you actually are. That is exhausting, in a way that is very hard to explain to someone who has not experienced it. I want to reframe something for you now gently, not to rush you past the pain, but to give you a different place to stand while you are in it. You have been thinking of this season as waiting, and waiting in the way most of us understand it feels passive. It feels like being put on hold. It feels like being overlooked, like everyone else got called forward and you are still sitting in the waiting room, wondering when your name will be spoken. That version of waiting feels very much like punishment, like something you are enduring because of a lack, a failure, an unworthiness you cannot quite identify but suspect must be there, somewhere. But I want you to consider a completely different possibility. What if you are not being overlooked? What if you are being positioned? There is a profound difference between those two things, and the difference is not just semantic. To be overlooked is to be unseen, uncounted, forgotten. To be positioned is to be deliberately placed, carefully set, intentionally located in a specific spot for a specific purpose that has not yet been fully revealed. One is abandonment, the other is strategy. You are not in the waiting room. You are in the preparation room. And those two spaces may look identical from the inside, but they lead to entirely different outcomes. The person who is overlooked waits and nothing changes. The person who is positioned waits, and then, when the moment arrives, everything shifts at once in a way that makes the waiting make sense. You are not abandoned, you are held. You are not forgotten, you are being kept. There is a difference between a delay and a denial, and what you have been experiencing is not a denial. It is a delay with a purpose you are not yet privy to, but the purpose is real. The plan is active, and the one who made you did not bring you this far to leave you here. If this is landing somewhere in you, if something in these words is touching a place that has not been touched in a while, I want to invite you to do something small right now. Type the word ready into the comments. Not because it is a magic formula, but because there is something powerful about declaring, even quietly, even just through a single word on a screen, that you are open, that you are willing to receive what is coming, that even though you are tired, even though the waiting has been long, you are still here and you are still ready. And while you are here, I want to say something to those of you who have found real value in messages like this one. This channel exists because people like you keep it alive. If these words have ever met you in a moment when you needed them, if they have ever given you language for something you were carrying alone, consider supporting this work with a donation. Whatever amount feels right for where you are. Not because you owe anything, but because every donation is what allows this message to reach another chosen one who is sitting somewhere right now in the same quiet ache you were in before you found these words. There is a link available for you to give, and every contribution, no matter how small, is an act of extending this reach to someone who desperately needs it. And if giving financially is not where you are right now, that is completely understood. You can support this work just as powerfully by liking this video, by sharing it with one person you think might need it today, and by subscribing so that the next message finds you when it is ready. Every one of those actions matters more than you know. You are not in this alone. Across the world right now, other chosen ones are listening to these same words and recognizing themselves in them. You are part of something larger than your current circumstances. And the season you are in, as heavy as it is not the end of your story. It is the ground being prepared for what is about to grow. I want to give you something practical today, because I know that for someone like you, someone who feels deeply and thinks constantly and carries the weight of a calling they cannot yet fully name, it is not always enough to simply hear that things are going to be all right. Sometimes you need something to do with your hands. Something to do with the hours of your day that gives your faith a physical shape, a place to land, a form it can take so that it stops being only an idea and starts becoming a practice. So before we go any further into what is coming for you, I want to give you a specific protocol, a set of steps so simple that you can do them anywhere, at any time, without any special equipment or training or prior experience. 3 steps. That is all. And if you do them with sincerity, if you bring your whole self to them, rather than just going through the motions, something will begin to shift in you. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way necessarily, but in the quiet, cellular way that real change always begins, underneath the surface, in the deep places, before it ever shows up in the visible world. Before I give you the steps, I want to explain why this protocol is structured the way it is. Your mind, right now, is running at a frequency that was designed for survival. When you have been through seasons of prolonged uncertainty, when you have spent months or years in a state of not knowing, of waiting, of carrying hope in one hand and exhaustion in the other, your nervous system adapts. It begins to operate in a kind of constant low-grade alert, scanning the environment for threats, replaying past disappointments, projecting future fears. This is not a character flaw. This is biology, doing exactly what it was designed to do. But the problem is that the frequency of survival and the frequency of breakthrough are not the same frequency. You cannot receive what is coming for you, while your whole system is tuned to the channel of protection and defense. You need to shift the frequency. And that is precisely what these 3 steps are designed to help you do. Step 1 is this. Before you do anything else, before you speak a single word of prayer or intention or declaration, I want you to remember something that did not happen to you. I know that might sound strange, so let me explain what I mean. Think back over your life, over the last year, the last 3 years, the last decade, and identify one specific thing that could have gone very wrong and did not. Not something that went right because of your effort or your planning. Something that was simply, quietly, inexplicably held back from you. A relationship that ended and at the time felt like devastation, but looking back, had it continued, would have cost you something you cannot afford to lose. An opportunity you did not get that, had you gotten it, would have taken you in a direction you now understand was not your direction. An accident that almost happened, an illness that came close, a door that closed with a firmness that felt cruel at the time, but that you can now, if you look honestly, see was an act of protection rather than punishment. Find one of those moments. Hold it in your mind. Let yourself feel the full weight of what did not happen, and then allow yourself to receive the gratitude that comes with that, not forced gratitude, not performed gratitude, but the quiet, genuine recognition that something or someone was watching over your steps in a moment when you were not even aware that watching was needed. This is not a small thing. This is the first frequency shift. Because gratitude for protection already received is one of the most powerful signals you can send into the invisible world that you are aware, that you are paying attention, that you understand you have not been navigating this journey alone. Sit with that for as long as it takes to feel something real. Do not rush it. Do not move to step 2 until step 1 has landed somewhere true in you. Step 2 is a declaration, and this declaration is connected to a specific understanding of time that I am going to spend more time with later in this message. But I want to introduce it here because it belongs in this practice. There are 2 kinds of time. There is the time that moves forward in a straight line, the time measured by clocks and calendars and deadlines and ages and anniversaries. The time that says you should have been further along by now. The time that compares your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 10 and finds you lacking. The time that makes the waiting feel like waste. That kind of time is real, but it is not the only kind of time that exists. There is another kind of time. A time that does not move in a line but arrives in a moment. A time that cannot be rushed or manufactured or engineered by effort alone. A time that is not about how long something has taken, but about whether the conditions are right for what is meant to happen. This is the time of apnapredness, the time of readiness, the time when everything that needed to be assembled has finally been assembled, and the moment that was always coming is now simply here. Your declaration in step 2 is this. Say it out loud if you can, or speak it quietly in your mind if you cannot. Say these words: I am not behind. I am not forgotten. I am not too late. I am arriving exactly at the time that was always appointed for me, and what was promised over my life is not canceled by the distance I have had to walk to get here. It is confirmed by it. Say it slowly. Mean it as much as you can. And if you do not fully believe it yet, say it anyway. Because the practice of declaring something true is one of the ways that truth begins to take root in soil that has been hardened by disappointment. You do not have to feel it completely to say it. You just have to be willing. Step 3 is 7 minutes of silence. 7 minutes. That is all. Not an hour of meditation. Not a complex breathing practice that requires a special cushion and a guided app and 17 years of spiritual discipline. 7 minutes of intentional, directed, receptive quiet. And here is how those 7 minutes work. You sit or lie comfortably. You close your eyes. You take 3 slow, deliberate breaths, in through your nose and out through your mouth, each breath slightly longer and slower than the one before it. And then you simply open. Not reaching, not straining, not trying to manufacture an experience or a feeling or a vision, just open. You are not doing this practice to achieve something. You are doing it to receive something. There is a profound difference between those two postures, and your body knows the difference, even when your mind is slow to catch up. In these 7 minutes, do not try to think good thoughts. Do not try to silence bad thoughts. Do not evaluate what is happening or narrate the experience to yourself. Simply breathe. Simply be present. Simply remain open to whatever the next 7 minutes want to bring you, whether that is a feeling of peace, a sense of warmth, an image, a word, a memory, a release of something you have been holding too tightly, or simply the strange and beautiful experience of being quiet in a life that is usually very loud. 7 minutes of this, practiced daily, does something that longer and more effortful spiritual practices sometimes fail to do. It trains your nervous system to exist in a state of receptivity rather than defense. It teaches your body what safety feels like at a cellular level. It creates a small daily window in which the frequency of your inner world shifts from survival to something closer to surrender. And surrender, in this context, does not mean giving up. It means releasing the grip of control long enough for what has already been prepared for you to find its way in. I want to tell you why 7 minutes specifically. There is a growing body of research on what happens in the brain during periods of quiet, focused, intentional stillness. Scientists studying brainwave patterns have found that certain frequencies in the brain, the frequencies associated with deep creativity, with intuition, with the kind of insight that does not come from thinking harder, but from thinking differently, these frequencies are not accessible when the brain is in its default alert state. They become accessible in a specific window of stillness, and that window, for most people, opens somewhere between 5 and 9 minutes of sustained quiet. 7 minutes sits right at the center of that window. It is not arbitrary, it is precise. And I am going to speak more about this science later in this message, because what researchers have discovered about the brain frequencies of people who consistently access states of deep clarity and creativity is something that directly applies to your life and to the calling you are carrying. But for now, the practice is the thing. The practice is the bridge between the season you are in and the season you are entering. And the practice is simple enough that there is no barrier between you and beginning it today. 3 steps. Remember something you are grateful for that did not happen. Speak the declaration about time and appointment and belonging. And then give yourself 7 minutes of open, receptive silence. Do these 3 things today. Not tomorrow, not when things feel more settled, not when your circumstances are more conducive. Today, in whatever imperfect, incomplete, slightly chaotic form today takes. Because the one who is fighting for you does not require perfect conditions from you before showing up. You do not need to have everything in order before grace can find you. You simply need to be willing to open the window. And if you do these 3 things consistently, if you build this small daily practice into the fabric of your ordinary life, something will begin to accumulate. Beneath the surface, something will begin to build. Not in a way you can immediately see or measure, but in a way you will eventually recognize. Because the person who comes out of daily stillness is not the same person who went in and over days and weeks and months. That difference becomes something you can no longer ignore. You are not just going through something, you are being shaped by something. And the practice you begin today is one of the ways you actively participate in that shaping, rather than simply being carried along by it. The waiting is not passive. The silence is not empty. And the 7 minutes you give to this practice today are not a small thing. They are the beginning of the frequency shift that changes everything. There is something the researcher has discovered that I need to tell you about, because it connects everything you have been feeling, everything you have been experiencing in this season, to something measurable, something documented, something that exists not only in the language of faith, but in the language of science. And I want to build that bridge carefully, because you deserve to understand not just what is happening in your life spiritually, but what is happening in your brain physically, in your body, in the actual wiring of who you are and how you are designed to function at your highest level. Here is what the science says. Every person carries a frequency, not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally. Your brain produces electrical activity that can be measured in waves, and those waves operate at different frequencies depending on your state of mind, your level of alertness, your emotional condition, and something else, something that the researchers did not fully expect to find: your depth of purpose. The people who consistently operate at the highest levels of creative insight, of intuitive knowing, of breakthrough thinking, the people who seem to access clarity and solutions and ideas that others cannot reach, these people share a measurable neurological signature. Scientists call it gamma. And what they found when they studied this frequency is that it is not randomly distributed. It is not simply a matter of intelligence or education or circumstance. The people who carry it most consistently are the people who have been through something, the people who have been pressed, the people who have had to dig deeper than the average person because the average path was not available to them. People, in other words, who carry exactly the kind of history you carry. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. And the extraordinary thing about this discovery is that it means the very experiences that have felt like obstacles in your life, the delays, the pressures, the seasons of isolation and uncertainty and refinement. Those experiences are not separate from your calling. They are part of the neurological preparation for it. Your brain has been shaped by what you have been through in ways that have made it capable of things it could not have been capable of otherwise. The suffering was not random. The waiting was not wasted. And the frequency you now carry as a result of having walked through what you have walked through is precisely the frequency that the next chapter of your life requires. I want to introduce you to someone whose work you need to know about, because what he discovered changes the conversation entirely. His name is Dr. James Rivers. He is a neuroscientist who received his training at MIT, one of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, and he spent more than 30 years of his career studying the relationship between brainwave frequencies and human performance, creativity, intuition, and what he began to call, after decades of research, activated potential. He also conducted extensive research in collaboration with NASA, studying how the brains of high-performing individuals differ neurologically from the baseline population, and what conditions are necessary to shift a brain from its default operating state into the state where genuine breakthrough becomes consistently accessible. What Dr. Rivers found, after more than 30 years and thousands of documented cases, is that the human brain has two frequencies that are most directly connected to what we would call living at full capacity. The first is theta, which operates at a range of 4 to 8 cycles per second. Theta is the frequency of deep creativity, of rapid learning, of the kind of intuitive knowing that arrives not from analysis, but from somewhere beneath analysis. It is the frequency that children operate in naturally and almost constantly, which is why children learn so fast and imagine so freely and move through the world with a kind of fluid openness that most adults have lost. As we grow older, as life presses us into patterns of stress and responsibility and survival, our brains gradually lose easy access to theta. We shift into higher, faster frequencies, beta primarily, the frequency of alert problem solving and task completion, and the constant low hum of anxiety that most adults carry as a baseline state. Theta does not disappear entirely, but it becomes harder to access, and most people go days or weeks without spending meaningful time in it. The second frequency is gamma, operating above 30 cycles per second, and this is the one that the research consistently associates with what Dr. Rivers calls the eureka state, the flash of insight, the moment of sudden clarity when something that was previously opaque becomes completely transparent, the experience that artists describe as flow and athletes describe as being in the zone, and spiritual practitioners describe as moments of deep divine connection. Gamma is the frequency of the highest human functioning. And what Dr. Rivers discovered is that it is not a frequency reserved for a special category of person. It is a frequency that every human brain is capable of accessing. The question is not whether your brain can produce gamma. It can. The question is whether you have a reliable way to get there. And this is where the science becomes directly relevant to you and to the 7-minute practice I introduced in Part 3. Because what Dr. Rivers spent the latter part of his research career developing is a specific audio technology designed to do one thing with precision and efficiency: guide your brain from its default survival frequency into the theta and gamma states where your actual potential lives. The mechanism is called brainwave entrainment, and the principle behind it is both simple and profound. The brain has a natural tendency to synchronize with rhythmic, external stimuli. When you expose the brain to specific sound frequencies delivered in a precise and carefully calibrated way, the brain begins to match those frequencies. It is not a passive experience. It is an active neurological process, measurable on an EEG, documented in peer-reviewed research, observed consistently across diverse populations and demographics. The brain follows the sound, and if the sound is designed correctly, the brain follows it into theta, into gamma, into the state where you stop merely surviving your life and start accessing the full depth of what you were designed to be. The specific tools that Dr. Rivers uses in his audio protocol include binaural beats, which work by delivering slightly different frequencies to each ear, allowing the brain to process the difference between them and naturally begin to entrain to the resulting frequency. They include isochronic tones, which are rhythmic pulses of sound that create a clear neurological signal for the brain to follow. And they include precisely calculated audio frequencies that have been tested and refined over years of research to produce the most reliable and efficient pathway into the states of deep creativity and heightened awareness that theta and gamma represent. The result is an audio track that is approximately 7 minutes long. 7 minutes, as I mentioned earlier, sits at the precise center of the window, during which sustained stillness allows the brain to complete its shift from beta into the deeper frequencies. It is not random. It is not approximate. It is the result of decades of careful research translated into a tool that anyone can use, anywhere, without any prior training or experience. This tool is called the Genius Wave. And I want to tell you about someone who used it, because numbers and science alone do not tell the full story. There was a woman who came to the Genius Wave in a season that sounds remarkably similar to the one you are in right now. She had been carrying the feeling for years that she was meant for something more specific than what her current life contained. She was not unhappy in any dramatic sense. She was functional. She was managing. But she described it as living at a distance from herself, as though the fullest version of who she was meant to be was always just slightly out of reach. She had tried everything she knew how to try. She had journaled and prayed and read and attended workshops and done all the things that are supposed to help a person access their purpose. And still, that clarity she was looking for remained elusive. She began using the Genius Wave, 7 minutes each morning before the demands of her day took over. And she told Dr. Rivers afterward that the shift was not dramatic at first. It was quiet. It was cellular. But within 3 weeks, something had genuinely changed in the way her mind was operating. Ideas that had previously felt out of reach began arriving with a naturalness that surprised her. A clarity about her next steps, which she had been seeking for literally years, simply appeared one morning during her 7-minute session, not as a vision or a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet and absolute knowing that she recognized immediately as true. Within 2 months of consistent daily practice, she had taken 3 concrete steps toward the life she had been sensing but not accessing, and each of those steps had opened into opportunities that confirmed, for her beyond any remaining doubt, that she was finally moving in the direction she had been prepared for all along. I know some of you are thinking right now that $39 is not nothing. And I want to say clearly and directly that I hear that. For someone in a season of financial constraint, for someone who has already spent money on tools and programs and resources that promise transformation and delivered something less than that, $39 represents a decision that deserves to be made carefully and honestly. That feeling is valid. I am not going to minimize it or talk over it, use urgency to push past it. What I will say is this: the regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access it today for $39. That price comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means that if you use this tool consistently for 90 days and you do not experience a meaningful shift in your clarity, your creativity, your sense of access to your own potential, you can request a full refund and you will receive it without question. The risk, in that sense, is not $39. The risk is $39 that you get back if it does not work. The only thing you cannot get back is the time spent waiting without a tool that could have been helping you access what is already inside you. One more thing before I move forward, and this is important. There are imitation versions of this product circulating online, audio files that use similar language but are not the genuine protocol developed by Dr. Rivers. Please do not purchase from any source other than the single link in the pinned comment below this video. That link is the only verified source of the authentic Genius Wave protocol. Anything purchased elsewhere carries no guarantee of quality, no authenticity of the specific frequencies, and no eligibility for the money-back guarantee. The pinned comment is where you need to go, and only there. I also want to be honest with you about availability. The pricing available through the pinned link today is not permanent. The $39 access point is a limited window, both in terms of time and in terms of the number of units available at that price point. I am not telling you this to manufacture pressure. I am telling you because it is the reality of how this offer is structured, and you deserve accurate information so that you can make your decision with full clarity rather than discovering later that the window closed while you were still deciding. The Genius Wave is not a replacement for the spiritual work you are doing. It is a complement to it. It is what happens when the insights of ancient wisdom about human potential meet the precision of modern neuroscience. And the result is a 7-minute daily practice that does not ask you to be more disciplined or more structured or more spiritually advanced than you currently are. It simply meets you where you are and helps your brain access what was always there, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. You have already done the hard part. You have already walked through the seasons that shaped you. This is simply the tool that helps you access everything that walking has built inside you. I want to stay with you here for a moment before we move forward, because what I am about to say is something that most messages like this one skip over too quickly. And I do not want to do that to you. I do not want to hand you a product and a promise and then rush past the part that actually needs to be acknowledged, the part that is still sitting quietly in your chest, even as you begin to feel the first edges of hope returning. Because hope and grief can exist in the same moment. Anticipation and loss can live side by side. And the person who is genuinely on the edge of something new is often also the person who is most acutely aware of what the long road here has cost them. So I want to talk about the cost, not to keep you in it, not to anchor you to a past that is ready to release you, but because you deserve to have someone look directly at what these years have taken from you and say, I see it. I am not going to spiritualize it away before you have had a chance to feel the weight of it fully. I am not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason in a tone that makes you feel as though your pain is simply a theological footnote rather than a real and significant human experience. What the years of waiting have taken from you is real, and I want to name it piece by piece because each piece deserves to be seen. The first thing the waiting took is relationships, not just the relationships that ended, though those matter too, but the relationships that never fully formed because you were not yet in the place where they could. There are people you were meant to build something with, deep and lasting and generative friendships, partnerships, a love that has the kind of roots that take years to grow. And some of those connections passed through your life before the timing was right, before you were standing in the place where you could fully meet them, and they moved on. There were seasons where the loneliness of your path made intimacy difficult, where the weight you were carrying made it hard to show up fully, where the uncertainty of your own direction made it nearly impossible to build towards something shared with another person. You may have watched people around you build families, deepen friendships, create communities of belonging, while you felt somehow slightly outside all of that, your nose pressed against a glass you could see through but not yet step through. That is a real loss. The relationships that could have been, that might still come, but that the waiting delayed, those are worth grieving. The second thing the waiting took is momentum in your work and your calling. There are things you could have been building. There are skills that could have been sharpened through years of active practice in the field you were meant to occupy. There are opportunities that presented themselves at moments when you were not yet positioned to receive them, and by the time you were ready, they had moved on to someone else. You have watched people with less preparation and less depth and less genuine commitment to their craft arrive at places you were working toward, and you have had to sit with the particular bitterness of that, the kind that you cannot fully explain to anyone who has not experienced it, because it is not simply jealousy. It is the ache of someone who knows what they are capable of and has not yet been given the arena in which to prove it. Years of that accumulate. They leave a mark. They create a story about yourself that you have had to fight, some days harder than others, to resist believing. The third thing the waiting took is the freedom to speak your dreams out loud. Early in your journey, you were probably more willing to share the vision. You told people what you believed was coming. You spoke about the things you felt called to with an openness and an enthusiasm that was natural and real. And then, gradually, the gap between what you declared and what was visibly happening began to create a different kind of pressure. People started to respond to your dreams with a skepticism that they did not always voice directly, but that you could feel. The slight hesitation before they answered. The careful encouragement that was really a gentle management of expectations. The looks exchanged when they thought you were not watching. And over time, you learned to stop saying certain things out loud. You learned to hold the vision privately, to protect it from the erosion that other people's doubt could cause, to keep it close and quiet where it could not be touched by anyone who did not understand it. That kind of protective silence is wise in many ways, but it also costs something, because the dream that cannot be spoken becomes heavier to carry. It becomes a secret burden rather than a shared hope. And the years of holding it alone, of being the only person in your immediate world who could see it and believe it and keep tending to it, those years leave a particular kind of fatigue that goes very deep. The fourth thing the waiting took is something even more personal, and I want to say it carefully because I want to get it right. The waiting, at various points, took your faith in yourself. Not your faith in God, not spiritual foundation, but the quieter, more vulnerable thing, your belief in your own perception, your trust in your own knowing. Because when you have felt called to something for years and the visible evidence of that calling has been slow to materialize, there comes a point, sometimes many points, where you begin to wonder if you imagined it. If the sense of destiny you have carried was something you constructed rather than something you received. If the knowing in your gut about who you are and what you are here for is real, or whether it is simply a story you have been telling yourself to make the ordinary feel more bearable. That doubt is one of the most corrosive things a person can experience, because it does not attack your circumstances. It attacks your relationship with your own inner voice. And rebuilding trust in yourself after seasons of that kind of erosion is slow and tender, and requires more grace than most people give themselves. I want to sit with you in all of that for a moment before I say anything else. Because there is a man in the ancient texts whose story I need to tell you, and I want to tell you only the part that most people rush past in their eagerness to get to the ending. His name was Joseph, and before the coat of many colors became a symbol of favor, and before the second most powerful position in Egypt became his, and before his brothers bowed before him, and the dream was fulfilled in ways that exceeded anything he could have imagined in the pit. Before all of that, there was the pit itself. Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers stripped the coat from his back and threw him into a cistern in the ground, while they sat nearby and ate their meal. While their brother was in the pit. The casual cruelty of that is something the text does not soften. He was pulled out of the pit and sold to traders heading to Egypt, separated from everything he had ever known, from his father who loved him deeply, from the land of his belonging, from the life he understood. He did not go to Egypt as a dignitary or a diplomat. He went as property, as cargo, as something bought and sold by the men who shared his blood, and then it got worse. He served faithfully in the house of Potiphar and was falsely accused and imprisoned. He interpreted a dream for a fellow prisoner who promised to remember him and then forgot. He sat in that prison for 2 years after that forgotten promise. 2 years. In a prison, in a foreign country, far from home, far from family, far from any visible evidence that the dreams he had been given as a young man had any relationship to the life he was actually living. I am not going to tell you about the ending right now. The ending is real, and it is extraordinary, and it is coming. But I want you to stay with Joseph in the prison for a moment. I want you to feel the weight of those 2 years after the forgotten promise. I want you to consider what it costs a person to hold on to a sense of calling through that. What it costs to keep believing in something you cannot see when everything you can see tells a different story. What it takes out of you to stay faithful in a place that makes no sense, that bears no resemblance to the future you were shown, that offers no visible evidence that the one who gave you the dream has any memory of it. Because that is not a biblical abstraction. That is your life. That is the cost of the years you have spent in your own version of the pit and the prison, the relationships, the momentum, the dreams you stopped saying out loud, the faith in your own, knowing that had to be rebuilt more than once from the ground up. I am not rushing past that. I am not reframing it too quickly. I am sitting with you in the middle of it and saying, that is real. What it cost you is real. The grief of it is legitimate. The weight of it is not something you imagined or exaggerated. It is something you carried, and carrying it for as long as you have required a strength that you have not always been given credit for, not by the people around you, and sometimes not even by yourself. And here is the thing about Joseph that matters most for where you are standing right now. The dreams he was given at 17 were not canceled by the pit. They were not nullified by the false accusation. They were not erased by 2 years of being forgotten in prison. Every single thing that was promised over his life was still intact, still active, still moving toward its appointed moment of arrival. The cost was real. The pain was real, the loss was real, and the promise was also real, not instead of the loss, alongside it. Both things fully true. At the same time, what was taken from you was real, and what was promised over you is also real, and nothing that the waiting has cost you has the power to cancel what was placed inside you before you were born. What you have just allowed yourself to feel is not weakness. The willingness to look directly at the cost, to name it without flinching, to sit in the grief of what the years have taken without immediately rushing toward the silver lining. That is one of the most courageous things a person can do. And I want you to carry that courage into what I am about to share with you now, because this next part requires a different kind of seeing. Not the seeing that looks backward at what was lost, but the seeing that looks at the present moment and recognizes it for what it actually is, rather than what it appears to be on the surface. I want to give you a new language for time, not to replace the grief, but to place it inside a larger frame. Because one of the most disorienting things about the season you have been in is that the way we normally measure time, in days and months and years and ages and milestones and deadlines, that way of measuring makes your story look like a story of delay. And delay, in the language of clocks and calendars, feels like failure. It feels like falling behind. It feels like the universe forgot to send the memo that you were supposed to be further along by now. But there is another language of time, an older language, a language that does not come from clocks, but from a deeper understanding of how moments actually work, how arrival actually happens, how the things that are most worth having tend to come not on a schedule we designed, but at a moment we could not have manufactured no matter how hard we tried. The ancient Greeks, who thought carefully about almost everything, recognized that there are two fundamentally different kinds of time, and they gave them different names because they understood that treating them as the same thing leads to profound confusion and unnecessary suffering. The first kind they called Chronos. Chronos is the time you are most familiar with. It is sequential, measurable, relentless. It moves forward, whether you are ready or not. It is the time of clocks and calendars, of birthdays and anniversaries, of deadlines and schedules, and the steady, indifferent march of days into weeks, into months, into years. Chronos does not care whether you are ready. It does not pause to ask whether the conditions are right. It simply moves, and everything that can be measured moves with it. In Chronos, a year late is a year late. A decade of waiting is 10 years of your life that you will not get back. Chronos is real. Chronos matters. But Chronos is not the whole story of time. The second kind the Greeks called Kairos, and Kairos is something entirely different. Kairos is not a quantity of time. It is a quality of time. It is the appointed moment, the right time, the moment that is not simply the next moment in sequence, but the moment in which something specific is meant to happen, in which conditions have aligned in ways that could not have been forced or rushed or manufactured, in which what was prepared and what was needed and what was promised all arrive at the same point simultaneously. In Kairos, the question is not how long something has taken. The question is whether this is the moment. And when it is the moment, when you are standing inside a Kairos rather than simply moving through Chronos, everything that happened before it, every delay and detour and disappointment and year spent in the wilderness, all of it suddenly reveals itself as preparation rather than punishment. I want you to hear this carefully, because I need you to understand what I am saying. The waiting you have experienced is not Chronos wasted. The waiting you have experienced is Kairos being assembled. There is a difference so large between those two things that getting it wrong will cost you your peace, and getting it right will change the way you experience every remaining day of your life. You have been measuring your story in Chronos. You have been counting the years and comparing the timeline to the one you imagined and finding yourself behind. But your story is not primarily a Chronos story. It is a Kairos story. And in a Kairos story, you are not behind. You are being brought to the moment. You are being carried toward the alignment that could not have existed any earlier than it exists right now. The delay was not a malfunction in the system. The delay was the system working exactly as it was designed to work, because Kairos cannot be rushed. It can only be entered when the preparation is complete. And the preparation, beloved, is nearly complete. This is not a reward for your effort. I want to be clear about that, because the idea that you are approaching your Kairos because you have worked hard enough, or been faithful enough, or suffered enough, creates a transactional relationship with grace that does not reflect how grace actually works. You did not earn this. You are not approaching a breakthrough because you finally accumulated enough spiritual merit to deserve it. You are approaching it because this is the appointed time. Because something was set in motion long before you were born that has been moving toward this moment, and you have been held inside that movement through every season, including the ones that felt like abandonment, including the ones that felt like proof that the promise had been canceled. Positioning, not payment. Kairos, not reward. The moment is coming not because you finally did enough, but because it was always coming. And it is now simply here. The second concept I want to give you comes from an ancient Hebrew word, and it is one of the most demonstrated words in the entire tradition of sacred waiting. The word is kava. It is usually translated into English as wait, as in those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. And that translation is not wrong, but it is incomplete, because kava does not simply mean to sit still and endure the passage of time. The root of the word carries a physical image, the image of braiding a rope. Think about what braiding a rope actually involves. You take multiple strands of material, each one individually weaker than you need, and you work them together with patience and with intention, over and under, twisting and layering, until what you have is something structurally different from any of the individual strands, something stronger, something more complex, something capable of bearing weight that no single strand could have borne alone. The braiding takes time. You cannot rush it without weakening the result. Each pass of the strand over the others is necessary. Each layer adds something that the layer before it could not provide on its own. And the rope that emerges from the process is not simply longer than a single strand. It is categorically different. It is a new thing. A thing with a tensile strength that did not exist in any of its components before they were brought together. This is what kava means. This is what the ancient word for waiting actually describes. Not passive endurance, not sitting in a room doing nothing while time marches forward. Active, intentional, participatory becoming. Every year of your waiting has been a strand in a rope that is being braided with a precision and an intentionality that you have not always been able to see from the inside. Every disappointment that did not destroy you added a layer. Every relationship that stretched you added a layer. Every season of isolation where you had no choice but to go deeper into yourself and into your faith because there was nothing external to lean on. Every one of those seasons added a layer. And what is being assembled through all of that braiding is not the version of you that started the process. It is something categorically stronger. Something capable of bearing the weight of what is coming in ways that the earlier version of you simply could not have borne. You are not delayed. You are being assembled. The rope is nearly complete, and a rope that is still being braided is not a failed rope. It is a rope that is not yet done. There is a profound difference between those two things, and the difference is everything. I want to bring these two concepts together now, Kairos and Kava, because they belong together. They are two sides of the same understanding. Kairos tells you that there is an appointed moment coming that cannot be rushed or manufactured. Kava tells you that the time between now and that moment is not empty time. It is not wasted time. It is the time in which the strands of your story are being braided into something capable of receiving what the Kairos moment carries. The waiting was never passive. Even in the seasons when you felt like you were doing nothing, when you felt stuck and stagnant and left behind, something was happening beneath the surface. Strands were being added. Layers were being built. Strength you do not yet know you have was being woven into the fabric of who you are becoming, and the Kairos moment that is approaching will not find you unprepared. It will find you exactly as prepared as it requires you to be, because the preparation and the appointed time were designed together by the same hand, with the same intention, for the same purpose. I want you to receive something right now, not as a concept, but as a personal word. The years you have spent in the space between the promise and the fulfillment have not been years taken from your life. They have been years invested in the person who will step into the fulfillment. The you who arrives at the Kairos moment is not the you who would have arrived 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It is a you that those years created, a you that has been braided through every strand of what you have walked through, a you that is right now nearly complete, nearly ready, standing closer to the appointed moment than you have ever stood before. And here is what I need you to understand about where you are right now in this moment, listening to these words. This is not a random Tuesday. This is not you stumbling across a video that happened to be recommended by an algorithm. This is a Kairos moment within the larger Kairos that is coming. This message finding you today, in this season with these specific words arriving in the order they are arriving, is not coincidence. It is confirmation. It is the invisible world using every available frequency to reach you with the same message it has been trying to deliver for a while now. The message that says you are closer than you think. You are more prepared than you feel. The rope is nearly complete, and the appointed time is not somewhere in the distant future. It is pressing against the present moment with an urgency that the spiritual eye can feel, even when the physical eye cannot yet see. The season of your wilderness is ending. Not because the calendar changed, not because you finally did the right thing, but because the preparation is complete, because the Kairos has arrived, because the Kava, the long and faithful braiding of everything you have walked through, has produced exactly the strand of person that the appointed moment requires. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are standing at the exact intersection of a promise and its fulfillment. And the ground beneath your feet, though it may still feel like wilderness, has already begun its transformation into the promised land that was always your destination. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. And at the midnight hour, when everything in the visible world suggested it was over, heaven began to move. Something is shifting right now, and I want you to feel it rather than just think about it. Not as a concept, not as a theological proposition, not as something you are being asked to believe as an act of intellectual assent, but as a physical reality that is already in motion in your life, whether you are fully aware of it yet or not. The concepts we have been sitting with, the Kairos that cannot be manufactured, the Kava that has been braiding your story into something structurally stronger than any of its individual seasons. These are not simply beautiful ideas to carry with you as comfort. They are descriptions of something that is actively happening. And what is actively happening is about to become visible. I want to talk to you about what is coming, not in vague general terms that sound inspiring, but leave you with nothing concrete to hold on to. I want to be specific because you have earned specificity. You have been in this long enough to deserve more than beautiful language about seasons turning. You deserve to know what the turning actually looks like, where it shows up first, what it feels like when it begins, and what you need to do, and equally importantly, what you need to avoid doing in order to step into it fully rather than inadvertently stepping around it. There is something building inside you right now that is unlike anything you have felt before in this season. It is not quite excitement, though it contains excitement. It is not quite peace, though it contains peace. It is more like a gathering, like something that has been scattered across a long and difficult journey is beginning to collect itself back into a center, like the parts of you that were dispersed by the years of waiting and the grief of what was lost and the exhaustion of holding hope longer than seemed reasonable are slowly, quietly, with a deliberateness that feels almost sacred, finding their way back to the core of who you are. You may have noticed it as a slight but unmistakable increase in clarity in recent days or weeks. A moment where an answer arrived that you had been seeking for months. A decision that suddenly felt simple when it previously felt impossible. A conversation that opened a door you had not even known was there. A feeling, perhaps only for a moment, of being exactly where you are supposed to be. Of your life making a particular kind of sense that it has not made for a long time. That is not random. That is the first edge of the kairos becoming visible. The first area where what is coming will show itself is in your relationships. And I want to describe this carefully, because the movement in this area often feels confusing and even painful before it reveals itself as the profound gift that it is. In the season that is opening before you, you will notice that certain relationships begin to create a friction they did not previously create. People you have been close to, people you genuinely love, will begin to feel slightly out of alignment with where you are going. Conversations that used to feel comfortable will start to feel like they require more energy than they return. There will be a pulling sensation, as though the current of your life is moving in a direction and certain connections, however meaningful they have been, are not moving with it. I want to be honest with you about this because it is one of the more disorienting parts of stepping into a new season. The people who are releasing from your immediate circle are not necessarily bad people or wrong people. Many of them have been genuinely important to your story. Some of them have carried you through seasons that would have been unbearable without them. But not every person who was right for a chapter of your life is right for every chapter. Some relationships were assigned to a specific season, and when that season completes, the relationship completes with it, not in bitterness or drama, but in a natural, quiet shifting of proximity. You are not losing these people permanently. You are simply moving into a space where your paths diverge, and that divergence, however uncomfortable it feels in the moment, is the necessary clearing that makes room for what is coming next. Because what is coming next in your relational world is extraordinary. There are people who have been positioned deliberately and specifically to enter your life at the exact moment when you step into the new season. These are not random connections. These are people who carry pieces of what you need, people who speak the language of where you are going rather than the language of where you have been, people who will look at the vision you have been carrying quietly and say, "I see it, I understand it, I want to help build it." You have been lonely in ways that have gone very deep, and part of what is coming for you is the specific antidote to that loneliness. Not a crowd, but a few, not a network, but a tribe. People who were made for the same mission you were made for, or and who will recognize you the moment you recognize each other. The second area where the shift will become visible is in your sense of purpose. Specifically, in the question that has haunted you for years, the question of what exactly you are supposed to be doing. That question, which has felt like a locked room you could see from the outside but not enter, is about to answer itself. Not all at once, not in a single overwhelming revelation that maps out every detail of the next decade, but in one clear, specific, small step that you will recognize immediately as true. It will not feel like a grand announcement. It will feel like a quiet but absolute knowing, like something clicking into place, like a key that was already in your hand suddenly fitting a lock that was always there. When that step reveals itself, and it is closer than you think, I want to tell you what to do with it. Do not wait until it feels comfortable. Do not wait until the conditions are perfect. Do not wait until you have enough money or enough confidence or enough external validation to feel certain that you are ready. Take the step. Take it imperfectly. Take it with trembling hands if you need to. Take it while you are still not entirely sure, but take it. Because the step is not asking you to be certain. It is asking you to be willing. And you have already demonstrated, through everything you have walked through, that willingness is something you carry in abundance. The third area is resources and opportunities. And this is the area where I want to be most specific about what is coming, because it is also the area where you have experienced perhaps the most visible lack. You have watched opportunities go to people who seemed less prepared than you. You have fought for things that should have come more naturally. You have worked harder than the results have reflected, and that gap between your effort and your reward has been one of the most demoralizing aspects of the season you are leaving. What is coming in this area is a reversal of that pattern. Not because the universe is suddenly becoming fair in some cosmic accounting sense, but because you are moving into alignment with what was always prepared for you, and what was prepared for you does not require the same level of striving that misalignment requires. There is a particular quality of effort that belongs to someone fighting upstream against a current that not their current. It is exhausting and it is heroic, and it leaves you with very little to show for an enormous amount of output. And then there is a different quality of effort, the effort of someone moving with their current, applying their energy in the direction of what they were specifically designed for. That effort produces results that seem disproportionate to those on the outside. People look at what you are building and wonder how you did it so quickly. But the answer is not that it was easy. The answer is that it was aligned. And alignment, when it arrives, changes the experience of effort entirely. Resources will begin to find you in ways that require you to update your understanding of how provision works. An unexpected conversation that opens an unexpected door. A person who has exactly what you need appearing at exactly the moment you need them. A financial shift that arrives not through a single dramatic windfall, but through a series of small openings that collectively change your situation in ways you could not have engineered through effort alone. You are moving out of the season of striving and into the season of receiving what is already yours. Now I want to tell you what not to do during this transition, because the choices you make in the threshold moment matter enormously. Do not go back. When the friction of releasing old relationships creates discomfort, resist the impulse to smooth it over by contracting back into the familiar. The discomfort of the release is not a sign that you are making a mistake. It is a sign that the release is real, that something is genuinely changing, and that the new space being created is not an absence but a preparation for what comes next. Do not speak the new thing into environments that cannot hold it. Not yet. There are people in your current world who do not have the capacity to receive the vision of where you are going, not because they are bad people, but because they are not assigned to that chapter. Protect the seed of what is emerging. Let it take root in private before you expose it to winds that could uproot it, before it has had a chance to establish itself. Do not mistake the quiet of this threshold moment for nothing happening. The most significant movements in the natural world happen in silence. Seeds germinate underground, invisible, for long periods before a single green shoot appears above the surface. What is happening in your life right now is the germination period. The silence is not absence. The silence is gestation. And do not rush. I know that sounds almost cruel after everything you have waded through. But the threshold moment has its own pace, and it is not the pace of your impatience. It is the pace of perfection, of everything arriving in the right order, of the fullness of the kairos, rather than a partial version of it that your striving pulled forward before it was complete. You can believe that what is coming is real even before you can see it. You can trust the gathering feeling inside you as evidence that something is genuinely in motion. You can allow yourself, perhaps for the first time in a long time, to hold hope without immediately bracing for the disappointment that has followed hope before. This time is different, not because your circumstances have changed yet, but because you have changed. The rope is complete, the kairos is here, and the one who has been fighting for you in the invisible places has not stopped. They are fighting harder now than ever, because you are closer than you have ever been. If something in these words is landing in that deep, quiet place where the truest things land, I want to invite you to type the word receive in the comments right now. One word. A declaration that you are open, that you are willing, that you are ready to stop bracing and start receiving. Type it and mean it. And as you type it, know that somewhere across the world, another chosen one is typing the same word at the same moment. And the two of you are part of a community of people who are all standing at the same threshold, all entering the same new season, all carrying the same ancient promise that is finally arriving at its appointed time. The word you just typed, or the word you held in your heart, if you did not type it, is not a small thing. I want you to understand that. In the tradition of the ancient texts, the declaration of readiness was never treated as a formality. It was treated as a threshold act. The moment of saying "I receive" was the moment the receiving actually began, not metaphorically but literally. The inner posture shifting from defense to openness, from bracing to welcoming, from survival frequency to something higher and more spacious. So whether you typed it or simply felt it, something in the invisible world just registered your willingness. And that matters more than you may currently understand. I want to give you a name now. Not the name on your birth certificate, not the name that the people in your past have called you, not the name that your longest season of struggle has tried to assign to you. I want to give you the name that belongs to what you are becoming. The name that describes the person who emerges from a training season like the one you have been in. The name that fits the specific shape of your journey and the specific calling that has been growing quietly inside you through every year of the wilderness. Your name is Waymaker, not in the sense of someone who simply finds their own way through difficulty, though you have certainly done that. A Waymaker, in the deepest sense of the word, is someone whose passage through a territory creates a path where none previously existed. When a Waymaker walks through a landscape, they do not just navigate it for themselves. They clear it. They mark it. They make it possible for others to follow. The ground they cover becomes ground that those who come after them can cover more easily. Not because the Waymaker removed every obstacle, but because their presence in that place, their willingness to go first, their courage to move through terrain that had no existing map, created the first lines of a path that will eventually become a road. You have been going through territory that had no map. That is not a metaphor for your feeling of isolation, though the isolation has been real. It is a literal description of what your life has been. You have been navigating situations that the people closest to you have not navigated, processing depths that your immediate community did not have language for, carrying questions and callings that the environments you grew up in were not equipped to address. And because there was no map, you had to feel your way forward. You had to learn by doing. You had to trust your inner knowing, even when the external world offered no confirmation of its validity. That is the work of a Waymaker. It is the hardest kind of work there is, and it is also the most important. Because the path you have been cutting through your own wilderness is not only for you. There are people who are 2 years behind you in their journey, 5 years behind you, 10 years behind you, who are going to arrive at the same terrain you have been navigating. And when they arrive, they will find that a path already exists. Not a highway, not a perfectly paved road, but the beginnings of a way through. A set of footprints in ground that would otherwise have been uncharted. Your story, when you are ready to share it, is not just your story. It is a map, and the people who need that map are already being prepared to receive it. This is what it means to be a Waymaker. This is your name for this season, and for everything that comes after it. Now I want to do something with you. I want to lead you through a brief exercise, and I want you to participate in it as fully as you are able, not as a performance, not as a technique, but as a genuine act of inner seeing. Because there is a kind of seeing that happens not with the physical eye, but with something deeper, and this exercise is an invitation into that deeper sight. Picture yourself standing at a threshold. Not a dramatic threshold, not a grand archway with light pouring through it in cinematic rays, just a threshold, a doorway. The kind of simple, ordinary frame that separates one room from another, one space from the next, one version of a place from a different version. You are standing at it. You are not yet through it. You are standing in the space between what has been and what is about to be, and you can feel the difference in the air between the two sides. Behind you is warmer, heavier, more familiar. Ahead of you is cooler, lighter, different in a way that is equal parts terrifying and deeply, unexpectedly right. Now I want you to turn around and look at what is behind you. Look at the landscape of the years you have walked through, not with judgment, not with regret, not with the exhausting inventory of everything you wish had been different. Just look at it honestly. See the distance you have covered. See the terrain you navigated without a map. See the places where you fell and got up again, and the places where you sat on the ground for a while before you got up, and the places where someone or something carried you when you could not carry yourself. See the seasons of darkness and the seasons of unexpected grace, and the long, ordinary stretches of days that felt like nothing was happening, but that were. You now understand. The braiding seasons, the kava seasons, the seasons when the rope was being made. Look at all of it. Let yourself see it for what it actually was, rather than what it felt like in the middle of it. Because from where you are standing now, at the threshold, the landscape behind you tells a different story than it told when you were in the middle of it. From here you can see the continuity. You can see how one season led into the next, how each difficulty contained within it the specific preparation for what came after it. How nothing was truly random, how everything Even the things you would never have chosen was part of the braid that made you the person who is now standing at this threshold. Stay with that view for a moment. Let it do something in you. Now turn back toward what is ahead. You cannot see it fully yet. The threshold does not offer a complete view of what is on the other side. That is not a flaw in the design. That is the nature of threshold moments. They require you to step through before the full picture is revealed. But you can feel it. You can sense its quality, its texture, its temperature. Ahead of you, there is something that fits you in a way that nothing behind you has ever quite fit. Not because what is behind you was wrong, but because it was preparation. And preparation is not the same as destination. What is ahead of you is the destination that the preparation was pointing toward all along. And here is what I need you to receive as clearly and as personally as anything else I have said today. You are already standing at the threshold. You are not almost there. You are not still on your way. You are not a few more miles from the doorway. You are in the doorway. You are standing in it right now, in this moment, with these words in your ears and this understanding newly in your heart. The threshold is not somewhere you are approaching. It is somewhere you are. And the step through it is not a giant leap into the unknown. It is the next natural movement of a person who has already done the hardest part. The hardest part was the wilderness. The hardest part was the years without a map. The hardest part was holding on to the knowing when nothing visible confirmed it. The hardest part was the pit and the prison and the forgotten promise and the 2 years of waiting after the forgetting. You did the hardest part. What remains is simply the step forward. One foot in front of the other, through a threshold you are already standing in, into a space that was always your destination. I want to speak some blessings over you now, not as ritual, not as formula, but as the genuine words of someone who has sat with you through these pages of your story and wants to send you forward with something carried in your spirit rather than just your mind. May the clarity you have been seeking arrive in your life with a gentleness that does not overwhelm you and a certainty that does not leave room for the old doubts to find purchase. May the relationships that are coming find you open and ready and willing to be known fully rather than partially. And may you discover in those connections the specific antidote to the specific loneliness that this season has carried. May the resources that belong to your next chapter arrive in ways that affirm rather than complicate, that open rather than close, that confirm rather than confuse, so that when provision comes, you recognize it immediately as what it is and receive it without the reflexive suspicion that too many disappointments can teach a person to carry. May your voice, the one you have been protecting in private, the one that carries the map of everything you have walked through, find its audience at exactly the right moment. And may that audience receive it with exactly the kind of understanding that makes the years of silence feel not like wasted silence, but like the silence that gave the voice its depth. May you walk through the threshold that you are standing in right now with your whole self. Not the managed and presentable version of you, not the version that has learned to show only what is safe, but the full, deep, complex, beautiful, hard-won, kava-braided person that the wilderness made you into. And may you know, in a way that does not require external confirmation to stay true, that the one who placed the calling inside you has never once looked away from your story. Not in the pit, not in the prison, not in the silence after the forgotten promise, not in the 2 a.m. ceiling staring nights, not in the seasons when the wave of sadness came without warning, and the grief had no clear object. In all of it, through all of it, someone was watching, someone was fighting, and Someone trusted you with this calling, not despite what you have been through, but precisely because of it. You are a waymaker, and the way is already opening before you. The blessing I just spoke over you was not the end of something. It was the beginning of something. And I want to make sure that what began in the spirit of those words finds its way into the practical shape of your actual days. Because the most beautiful spiritual experience in the world becomes hollow if it has no traction in the real life you are living. When you close this video and go back to your kitchen and your work and your relationships and the ordinary Tuesday that is waiting for you on the other side of this message. So I want to talk to you now about what to actually do, not in a vague, inspirational sense. In a concrete, specific, this is what the next season looks like in the actual texture of your life sense. There are things that are about to change in 3 specific areas, and I want to walk through each one with enough detail that you can recognize the change when it begins rather than missing it, because it did not arrive in the form you expected. Because the arrivals of new seasons rarely look the way we imagined they would. They tend to look smaller at the beginning than they eventually become. They tend to arrive quietly before they arrive loudly. And the person who is paying attention to the small and quiet arrival is the person who is positioned to steward what follows it into its full expression. But before I walk through the 3 areas, I want to give you one immediate practical action. Something you can do right now, today, before the details of your ordinary life reclaim your full attention. Not a complicated action. Not something that requires preparation or resources or the right circumstances. Something so simple that the only barrier between you and doing it is the decision to do it. Write 1 sentence, just one, on a piece of paper, in the notes application on your phone, in the margin of a journal, anywhere that you will see it again. Write 1 sentence that describes, as specifically as you are currently able, the thing you most deeply sense you are moving toward. Not the complete vision, not the fully formed plan. Just 1 sentence that points in the direction of what you feel called to. It does not need to be eloquent. It does not need to be certain. It can be tentative and incomplete and slightly uncertain at the edges, but write it. Give the direction a physical form in the world, even a small one, because the act of writing it is an act of commitment. And commitment, even in its smallest expressions, sends a signal into the invisible world that you are serious, that you are ready, that you are no longer simply holding the vision in your mind, but beginning, however gently, to bring it into reality. Write the sentence, do it today. That is your first action. Now let me walk you through the 3 areas that are about to transform, with enough specificity that you can recognize them and respond to them wisely when they begin to move. The first area is relationships, and I want to build on what I said in part 7, with more practical detail about what this actually looks like in your day-to-day life. The relational shift that is coming does not announce itself with a dramatic event. It does not begin with a single conversation that changes everything or a single encounter that transforms your social world overnight. It begins subtly. It begins with a feeling. You will notice, if you are paying attention, that certain people in your life suddenly feel slightly effortful in a way they did not before. Not because they have done anything wrong, not because the relationship has become toxic or harmful, but because the version of you that fit comfortably in that relational dynamic is being replaced by a newer version that does not fit quite as naturally. This is not a reason to cut people off, or to behave with coldness, or to make dramatic announcements about how you are changing. It is simply information. It is the relational landscape giving you data about which connections are growing with you. and which ones have reached the natural completion of their season. What you need to do with that information is hold it gently. Observe it without acting on it impulsively. Give the relationship space to either grow with you or complete gracefully, without forcing either outcome. The ones that are meant to grow with you will find their way into the new season organically. The ones that have completed their season will naturally create distance, and your job is to allow that distance without guilt and without the anxious attempt to close it back down just because the closing feels uncomfortable. At the same time, begin to position yourself in environments where the people who are assigned to your next season are likely to be. This is not strategic networking in the transactional sense. It is intentional exposure. It means showing up in places that align with where you are going, rather than only the places that feel familiar because they belong to where you have been. A gathering of people who share your emerging interests. A community organized around the values of your calling rather than the habits of your comfort zone. An online space, a local group, a professional community. Any environment where the people who speak the language of your next season are already gathering. You do not need to force connection, you simply need to be present. The recognition will happen naturally when the right people are in the same space. The second area is purpose, and I want to address the specific paralysis that many people in a season like yours experience around this word. Purpose has become a heavy word. It carries with it the expectation of clarity and certainty, and a complete and fully formed sense of direction that most people, most of the time, simply do not have. And the gap between that expectation and the actual experience of purpose, which almost always reveals itself incrementally rather than all at once, is one of the main reasons people stay stuck in the waiting rather than stepping into the doing. So I want to reframe what you are looking for. You are not looking for the complete picture of your purpose. You are looking for the next step, just one. The step that is directly in front of you, visible from where you are currently standing, that moves you in the direction of what you sense you are called to. It does not need to be a big step. In fact, the smaller it is, the more likely you are to actually take it, and taking it is what matters more than its size. The question to ask yourself is not what is my purpose? That question is too large for where you are standing and tends to produce paralysis rather than movement. The question to ask is, what is the one thing I can do today or this week that is consistent with the direction I sense I am moving toward? One thing, a phone call you have been putting off, a piece of writing you have been holding back from starting, a conversation you have been avoiding, because starting, it means committing to the direction it points toward. A skill you have been meaning to develop. A door you have been standing in front of without knocking. Knock on it this week. Not because you are certain of what is on the other side, but because the person who knocks is the person who eventually finds out. And the person who waits for certainty before knocking often waits for a very long time. Because certainty is almost never available at the beginning of anything worthwhile. What is available is willingness, and you have that. The practical action for this area is to identify one specific, small, doable thing that is in the direction of your calling and commit to doing it before the end of this week. Write it down alongside the sentence you wrote earlier. 2 things on paper, a direction and a step. That is a beginning. That is more than most people do in a month of thinking about their purpose. The third area is resources and opportunities, and this is the area where I want to specifically address the internal work that makes the external shift possible. Because resources and opportunities do not arrive in a vacuum. They arrive in response to a particular inner condition, and That condition is one of the things that the season you are leaving has been developing in you, whether you recognized it as development at the time or not. The inner condition that attracts aligned resources and opportunities is not desperation. Desperation, however understandable, sends a frequency into the world that tends to repel the very things it is reaching for. The inner condition is not striving either. Striving produces results, but they tend to be the results of force rather than flow, and they tend to require the same level of effort to maintain as they required to achieve. The inner condition that changes the experience of provision is something closer to what I described earlier in the context of the 7-minute practice. It is receptive expectancy, the posture of someone who genuinely believes that what belongs to them is already in motion toward them, and whose job is not to chase it down, but to be ready to receive it when it arrives. This sounds passive, but it is not. Receptive expectancy is an active inner state. It requires you to consistently release the grip of scarcity thinking, the thought pattern that says there is not enough, that the good things go to other people. That provision requires you to fight for every inch. That thought pattern, however understandable given what you have been through, is a frequency that your brain has been trained into by years of genuine lack, and it requires deliberate daily practice to retrain. The 7-minute practice I described is part of that retraining. The gratitude exercise at the beginning of that practice is part of it. The declaration about time and appointment and belonging is part of it. But there is another practical element that I want to add to that daily practice for this specific area. Once a day, I want you to spend 2 minutes, just 2, identifying one specific way in which provision arrived in your life in the last 24 hours that you did not manufacture through your own effort. It may be small. It may be as simple as a meal that was provided, a connection that was made, a piece of information that arrived at the right moment, a moment of unexpected clarity. Name it. Write it if you can. And as you name it, say out loud, "This is evidence that provision is already moving toward me. This is proof that I am not fighting alone. This is confirmation that the one who promised has not stopped working." Do this daily, because the mind that is being retrained out of scarcity needs daily evidence, and the evidence is always there if you are looking for it. The challenge is that the default frequency of survival tends to filter out evidence of provision in favor of evidence of lack. You have to actively retrain the filter. 2 minutes a day of deliberate evidence gathering does that retraining over time in a way that is measurable and real. Now let me be direct with you about what is coming in this area beyond the inner work. Financially and professionally, the shift that is approaching is not going to look like a single dramatic event in most cases. It is going to look like a series of small openings that collectively constitute a significant change, a conversation that leads to an opportunity that leads to a relationship that leads to a resource that unlocks a door, each step small, enough to miss if you are not paying attention, but collectively constituting the reversal of a pattern that has held you back for longer than it should have. The no more fighting, but getting your due that I mentioned earlier is not about passivity. It is about alignment. When you are moving in the direction you were designed for, effort produces results in a way it simply cannot when you are forcing yourself into spaces that were never yours. The same energy that was producing minimal results in misalignment will begin to produce disproportionate results in alignment. Not because you suddenly became more capable, but because the capability you already have is finally being applied in the direction it was specifically designed for. You are stepping into that alignment now. The door is open, The path is cleared. The waymaker is about to walk the way that was always theirs to walk. And I need you to know, as practically and as personally as I can say it, that you are not doing this alone. The one who has been battling for you in the invisible places has not rested, has not paused, has not grown tired of your story, or impatient with your process, or weary of fighting on your behalf. Every day of the wilderness was a day of active, deliberate, strategic fighting on your behalf. Every door that closed was a door closed by someone who loved you enough to redirect you. Every provision that arrived, however small, however quietly, was provision that was sent. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. And as you take the practical steps of this next season, as you write the sentence and knock on the door and gather the evidence and position yourself for the new relationships and commit to the one small step of purpose, you are not taking those steps in isolation. You are taking them as someone who is accompanied, as someone who is covered, as someone for whom the battle has already been fought and the outcome has already been determined. The only question remaining is whether you will step forward into what has already been prepared. The answer is already in you. You showed up here today. You listened all the way through. You held on through the grief of part 5 and the new language of part 6 and the practical weight of everything that has followed. That kind of showing up is not the behavior of someone who is giving up. That is the behavior of someone who is stepping in. Step in, Waymaker. The way is already made. I want to take a moment before I say anything else to simply acknowledge that you are still here. That might sound like a small thing, but I want you to understand that it is not. In a world full of noise and distraction and the constant competition for every second of human attention, the fact that you stayed, that you listened through all of it, through the grief and the naming and the science and the ancient language and the practical steps and the blessings, that is not a passive act. That is a declaration. Every minute you stayed was a minute of choosing yourself, a minute of saying that what is happening inside you matters enough to be tended to carefully and honestly and at length. And I do not take that lightly. I want you to know that I do not take you lightly. There is a part of you that showed up today that I want to speak to specifically. Not the confident part, not the part that has it mostly together, not the part that performs capability and composure for the watching world. I want to speak to the part that almost did not come. The part that has been disappointed enough times that showing up for something like this required a small act of courage that nobody else saw or acknowledged. The part that sat down to listen today with one hand on hope and one hand still braced for the familiar ache of things not quite landing the way you needed them to. That part of you, the one that came anyway, the one that kept listening even when the words got close to the tender places, that part of you is the most important part that was in the room today. And I am grateful it stayed. I want you to hear something that I mean with my whole self. You are not alone in this, not in any sense of that word, not spiritually, not practically, not in terms of the specific experience of carrying a calling in a season that has not yet made full room for it. Right now, as you are sitting or standing or lying down listening to these final words, there are chosen ones all across the world walking into this exact same message, in different time zones, in different languages in their hearts, even if the words they are hearing are the same, in different versions of the wilderness, in different chapters of the waiting, but carrying the same frequency, the same knowing, the same ache, and the same hunger, and the same unshakable sense that they were made for something that has not yet fully arrived. You are in a room that is more crowded than it looks. You are part of a community of people who are all standing at the same threshold, all carrying the same ancient promise, all being moved by the same invisible hand toward the same appointed time, that none of them manufactured, but all of them have been faithfully walking toward. You are not the only one, and that is not a small comfort. That is a profound one. I want to do one final exercise with you before we close, and I want you to receive it as a gift rather than a task, because you have been carrying something for a long time, and I think it is time to set some of it down. Picture yourself at the threshold again, the same doorway from part 8. You are standing in it, one side behind you and the other side ahead. But this time, I want you to notice something you did not notice before. There is a space just at the foot of the threshold, right at the base of the doorway, and it has been quietly waiting for something to be placed there, not permanently, not in abandonment, but in release, in the conscious, intentional act of choosing not to carry across the threshold what does not belong in the next season. I want you to think about what you have been carrying that is ready to be set down. Not your calling, not your faith, not the deep knowing of who you are and what you are here for, but the other things. The record of every time you were overlooked, the mental file of every door that closed in your face, the weight of every relationship that ended before you were ready, the grief of the timeline you thought you would be living by now, the exhausting habit of bracing for disappointment, the self-doubt that accumulated through years of waiting without visible confirmation, the shame around dreams that took longer than you thought they should, the small daily ache of being unseen by the people who should have seen you most clearly. These things have served a purpose. They were part of the braiding. They added strands to the rope, but they do not need to cross the threshold with you. They can be honored for what they contributed and released from their duty at the same time. You are not betraying the past by refusing to carry it into the future. You are completing it. You are saying, you did your work. You shaped me, and now I am stepping forward shaped by you, but no longer weighted by you. Place it all at the foot of the threshold, every piece of it. Take as long as you need. And when you have set it all down, stand up straight, because the person who is about to step through that doorway stands differently than the person who has been carrying all of that. Taller, lighter, more themselves, ready in a way that all the previous seasons were building toward. That is you, standing straight, ready to step through. Before you do, I want to ask you for something, and I want to ask it in the way that feels most honest to me, which is not as a commercial transaction, but as a continuation of the mission that brought you here today. This channel exists because someone decided that chosen ones deserve to have their experience named honestly, and their calling affirmed specifically, and their season honored in its full complexity, rather than flattened into a 30-second inspirational clip. Every message like this one takes significant time and care and intention to create, and the only way it continues to reach the people who need it most is if the people it has already reached choose to extend it forward. So if these words met you somewhere true today, if something in this message gave language to something you have been carrying without language, I want to ask you to do a few things. Like this video, not as a courtesy, but as a signal to the platform that this content deserves to be seen by more people. Share it with one person, just one, who you know is in a season like the one described here, who is carrying the ache of a calling in a season that has not made full room for it, who needs someone to sit beside them and name what they are feeling before rushing them toward the solution. Subscribe to this channel so that the next message finds you when it is ready, because there is more to say, and you deserve to be there when it is said. And if you are in a position to support this work financially, There is a donation link available, and every contribution, regardless of its size, is an act of extending this reach. One who is going to wake up next Monday without anyone to name it for them. You giving today is them receiving tomorrow. That is not a small thing. That is a continuation of the Waymaker calling, making a way for someone who does not yet know a way exists. Whatever you are able to give is honored and received with genuine gratitude. I also want to mention something one final time, gently and without pressure, because I think it belongs here at the close of this message. The genius wave. If somewhere in the middle of everything we walked through today, the science and the 7-minute practice and the description of what happens in a brain that is finally operating at the frequency it was designed for, if that found you somewhere true and something in you recognized it as a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. $39, 90-day guarantee, 7 minutes a day. A tool built by someone who spent more than 30 years understanding exactly what a brain like yours needs to access everything it has been prepared to carry. You do not have to decide right now, but if you already know, the link is there, and it will be there when you are ready. I want to close now with something that I have been holding through this entire message. Something I want to leave with you, not as information, but as a word that travels with you when you close this video and go back to your life. The battle that you thought was against you has never been against you. Every force that was arrayed against your progress, every door that closed, every person who doubted you, every season that stripped you of something you were holding too tightly, every midnight hour that left you crying in the dark with no visible reason for hope. None of it was the final word on your life. None of it had the authority to cancel what was placed inside you before you were born. None of it could stop what has been set in motion on your behalf by a hand that does not tire, and a love that does not waver, and a plan that does not depend on circumstances cooperating to remain intact. Someone trusts you more than you imagine. That is not a comfort. That is a fact. The calling on your life is not a reflection of your performance in the wilderness. It is a reflection of what was seen in you before the wilderness began, before the disappointments, before the delays, before the accumulated weight of years that did not look the way you hoped. What was seen in you then is still what is true about you now, and the one who saw it has been fighting for it, for you, every single day of every season you have walked through. You are not at the end of your story. You are at the threshold of its most important chapter. And everything that has brought you here, every strand that was braided into the rope of who you are, every season of the wilderness that shaped you for what you could not yet see, every midnight hour that brought you to your knees, and then, when morning finally came, left you standing taller than you were before. All of it was preparation. All of it was necessary. All of it was the Kairos being assembled, the Kava being completed, the Waymaker being made. Step through the threshold, beloved. The other side is yours. And all across the world tonight, other chosen ones are stepping through with you. You are not alone. You have never been alone. And the one who has been battling for you has not stopped. Not for a single day. Not once.